All right, Andy Pettitte, I'm so jacked up to get one of my mentors, one of my big brothers on the podcast, one of the men who helped really give me a glimpse as to what it looked like to be a follower of the way, to be a real dude as a worker, as a teammate, and as a competitor. And I will tell you, Jimmy, what I'm excited about having Andy on. Most people know that Andy's one of the greatest winners of all time. 5 World Series championships, was a part of a three-peat with the Yankees, won 5 titles with the Yankees, 4 before he left to come to the Astros and lead the Astros to the first ever World Series appearance. Now they're normals in the World Series, but at the time they had never been. Then he went back and won more with them just for giggles. Got the most wins in postseason history. And because of that, he's a sought-after speaker. And did you know, Jimmy Dykes, that this offseason, this summer, I believe, Pet, you went and spoke to the Georgia Bulldogs. Now, he and I are working through that. Like, I'm not sure how I feel about it.
Challenge of friendship.
Yeah, it has. It's been a little bit of a rift, but I've given that up to Grace. But, Pet, I would actually like to start. It is college football season. We're right here. We're kind of headed down the wire of college football season. I would love to know, as one of the greatest winners in American sports history, what did you learn, number one, by being around the Georgia Bulldogs program? What did you learn? But then also, what did you teach them about? Coach us up.
Yes, I mean, really and truly, just I learned that college football has gone to another level.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, being there for the day, seeing just, I did not dream of the magnitude of the facilities, the amount of people, it's big time. It's literally like it's beyond, professional sports, I almost feel like, as far as when I think about Yankee Stadium and even our new stadium and just the facilities and the way things were taken care of. I mean, these kids have got it all, right? I mean, just everything is right there for them. Food everywhere. And then of course you get into the practice and you see the way Coach Smart runs things, right? And how on top of things that he is. It was an eye opener for me to have never really have been around the football side of college sports, especially at that level. Mm-hmm. And then what I was brought in to just talk about was really just talk about winning, talk about, they really weren't focused a whole lot on, we got to win another championship. It was like, what do we need to do to be good and to get better and better and better each week. And hopefully we can stay healthy and things, turn out for us the right way. And really just talked about, Chris, my career, and the things that I had learned. Man, team, what that should look like, leadership, what their older guys, the guys that had won national championship the year before, the leadership role that they'll need to take on this team because they had been there, they'd been through it. And then just each week, the battles that you face each week and endure, how that's going to be a stepping stone to get you to where you want to be, So really, it was, a 45-minute talk of just kind of going through a laundry list of things that I thought really helped me and that I learned in my career, and it was great. They were wonderful. They were very attentive. Having a baseball guy there, you'd think it'd be like not even paying attention to what you're saying.
Yeah.
It was a group of young men that were locked in, I was very impressed. And I think you're seeing. When you have a group of kids that buy into something and what they're doing is pretty impressive this year.
Yeah, Jimmy, if you don't mind, Pat, I know you were part of the Captain series that played this fall, whenever that launched on ESPN, about Jeter and his career and all the accolades that went along with it. Obviously, you were a big part of that, right? The core four, you and Rivera and Posada and Jeter. I don't think many of us, Jimmy, I think you would maybe agree, there was a period of time there in American sports where the Bulls had three-peated twice, right? And you guys three-peated. And I don't know, maybe we didn't give you guys your due because you're the Yankees, and of course you guys wanted you know what I'm saying? But I think back at that, and I think, man, I just feel like as somebody that spent as much time together as you and I did, I never really asked you about the grind of winning 3 in a row and 4 out of 5, right? 3 in a row, 4 out of 5.
Yeah.
Like, as you have so much space away from that now, and obviously you're still part of the Yankees, and I'm sure you guys talk about it some, but like, what do you reflect most on being able to do that, the grind of winning? Because it's not just being the best team. There's so much more, right? 3 in a row, like.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to put your finger on, how that can happen because you have to have so many things go right? I mean, I just like you just said, the best team isn't always going to win, the best team on paper. And, we always had just a really good group of guys. We had great chemistry. I think relationships and chemistry on a team or one of the biggest things that go along with it. From the 2005 team, what we were able to do with the Houston Astros. Not that we might as well, we could just say it. We were a little short on talent compared to a lot of the other teams, but man, did we have a group of men that loved each other, that rallied around each other and cared for each other. And I think that's huge, We had a good nucleus of guys. When I look back at those early Yankee teams, same thing. We had a good nucleus of guys. I was a starting pitcher, right? So I pitched once every 5th day, sometimes come back early and pitch, on my 4th day. So I give a lot of credit to our position players, to guys like Derek Jeter, Mariano Rivera, the guys that were there, George Posada. I say Mo. Mo is obviously the greatest closer ever to play the game. So it was awesome to always have him closing our games out. But the intensity that our position players brought, and obviously Derek being the captain was kind of the captain, kind of the leader of that. Each and every day, just doing it the right way, playing the game the right way, playing hard. He was kind of the catalyst of that and led that. And I think guys looked around and saw, well, man, if this dude's the captain, he can play this hard each and every day. Everyone else kind of followed in suit, And so it was, like I said, it was easy for me every 5th day to get up and be ready. And I feel like that I brought a lot to the dugout in between my starts. I felt like I had a big role on making sure if our guys didn't look like they were up and ready to play that day, that I was there to kind of push them and jab them and grind them, to get them going if it didn't look like the team was ready to play, And so I kind of also took that role just as a pitcher. I think after you win and win a lot like I did early in my career, you kind of feel comfortable doing that where sometimes if you wouldn't have, it's maybe not quite as comfortable.
And Andy, you talked about when you spoke with Georgia, talking about the weekly battles. I've heard you use the word grind already a couple of times. I did a basketball game recently where a team was coming off a really bad loss, and the coach was talking to them the next day about it's supposed to be hard.
Yeah,
like life's hard. Winning the game is hard. I think a lot of people run from hard. I used that actually to talking about that team within the broadcast. People run from hard. It's not always easy in life. It's not always easy in our faith. Can you kind of talk about what you've learned from sports in that it's going to be hard, just like our pursuit of our daily walk? I'd like to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, Jim, I mean, you're dead on. And I mean, what's crazy is it's human nature, like you just said. We don't want it to be a grind. We don't want it to be hard. And even like after walking through probably 12, 13, 14 years of my career, I can remember speaking with guys in the Yankees organization when, you just are beat up, you're tired, and you're like, why does every game do I have to have 2 and 3 base runners on base every inning? Like I don't want it to be like that, right?
Yeah, right.
When I was, I'm 37, 38 maybe, and they bring CC Sabathia in, and he's just dominating games, right? I mean, CC might be striking out 12, and I'm striking out 2 to 3 batters a game, and it's like you're just grinding through them. And I mean, I'm like, you'll watch him, you'll watch AJ pitch at times, and then, you start bringing these big arms in, and I'm like, well, why can't I have an easy game like them, And I mean, literally, it's human nature, to start looking around and being like, this is just too hard, But the biggest thing is, and you always have to remind yourself, and even after all the years that I played, I would have to have people remind me, enjoy the grind, If you can learn to love the grind, and expect. When I started going out every 5th day knowing I was expecting that this is going to be a battle and mentally being ready for it, and literally got to the place, which is kind of sick. It really is, that you get to the place to where you really do love it. I loved it in my training. I loved it when I took the mound. I ended up loving working, and really and truly being retired and now being out of the game for 9 years. That's what I really miss more than anything is obviously the relationships you build with your teammates, but just the whole just grind and the push and every day trying to get better. That's what kind of kept me going, especially late in my career.
How does that carry over to our walk with God, Andy? How does that perseverance, that grind, that embracing hard, how do you think that carries over in that area?
For me, I don't want to say that I've got this figured out, but life's hard. I mean, there's so many things that get thrown at you on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, from family issues, from friend issues, from just worldly, things that are going
kids.
on. The kids, exactly. Yeah, it's a huge thing. I mean, my kids are older now. I've got one more as a senior in the house, and so you feel like you kind of get to a place where you've raised your kids, but there's still a lot that goes on with that. I got grandbabies now and stuff. So there's so much stuff. There's so many different dynamics, and I just kind of come to the place to where I just know that, man, God's in control. And this is constantly, as long as we're here on this earth, it's constantly going to be this battle between, the flesh and the holiness that we want to have. We're kind of walking through Romans right now in our church, and I just kind of think about that, and it's a battle, and even in our Christian walk, it's the same way. It's a daily grind, but I just always look back and I know that man, Jesus has got me. I'm a Christian. I'm saved. I'm going to heaven. I know that, and He's got me right in the palm of His hand. And things that I'm walking through, the things that my family's walking through, these aren't accidents. He knows it, and I believe that He's always trying to mold us and shape us into the person that He wants us to be. And so that's kind of the way I look at it. That's the perspective that I kind of have on it, and that's kind of what I try to share, as a believer.
Jimmy, I like kind of what Andy's saying. I could go back and I could take you through the twists and turns of my career and tell you a million things. But the one thing, there's many things that I would say that, like I think we'd all agree. If you could do it all over again, you wish this would have happened. Maybe I'd have done this. Maybe I'd have done that. One thing I'm so blessed to have played on those Astros teams with so many influential people. It certainly wasn't the scenario selfishly, individually, that was best for me. But as somebody far removed from my career, I'm so grateful to have played with so many different types of special people. And Andy is at the top of that list. And I quote him all the time. Just a couple things on Andy that I'll never forget. In 2004, his first year with the Astros, Jimmy, they had to take him off the mound because he was throwing 80. and he had been nursing an elbow injury for how long, Pat? 2, 3, actually years, right?
Yeah.
But finally his elbow and he literally wouldn't take himself out of the game, Jimmy. And he was getting outs. He was out there as in Milwaukee, wasn't it, Andy?
It was New York.
You were in New York?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
and he's throwing 82, and Phil goes out to the mound Andy, you're obviously hurt, Pet.
Yeah.
Pet wouldn't take himself out of the game. Finally, he got his flexor tendon or whatever it was, Andy.
Yeah.
The next year, we end up losing in the NLCS Game 7 that year, but the next year we go to the World Series. And so many guys on that team, Jimmy, all his accolades, most wins in postseason history, all these World Series championships. There is no amount of equity you can earn in a locker room when you show that kind of toughness.
Absolutely.
And we talk about mental toughness a lot. Sometimes that's easy to see. Sometimes that's harder to see. But there's a physical toughness, too, associated with walking with the Lord that I think Andy displayed that was easy for men to follow. It was wow, what's inside of him is different. The fact that he's not bowing out of this. They had to literally rip him off the mound. The other thing, Andy, I was quoting you the other day. I did the playoff series between the Mets and the Padres. And I was quoting you the other day how you used to say, if you gave up 2 in a postseason game, you expected a no decision, and if you gave up 3, you expected a loss. Now, think about that, Jimmy. I made the mistake one time of saying to Andy, man, it must have been nice playing with all those Yankees teams. And he looked at me like, dude, as great as we were, I'm just telling you, if I gave up 2 in the postseason game, I expected a no decision. If I gave up 3, I expected a loss. And as I watch the postseason games, Andy, I'm always reminded of that, of what a grind it was. So here's my question. Your faith, I know, because we've had a lot of these conversations, had a big part in your ability to perform in the biggest moments. And pitching for the Yankees in those moments, you could argue that's as great a pressure as there is in sports. How did your faith allow you to handle that so well?
Yeah, I knew, like I said earlier, I knew that, God was in control of my life. God had me. I felt like I was a winner, no matter what, because I had accepted Jesus and I was going to spend eternity with him, right? And then he just gave me the peace as far as to be able to have the calmness, right? I can't tell you how many times that I would go out there and when I felt the anxiety get too high, when I felt like my heart was just racing too fast and just beating too fast, and I had experienced it, right, as a young player because I had so many opportunities and I knew kind of when it was coming on and how this game can get away from you. And for me, I literally would just be out there on the mound a lot of times and just bow my head and say, Lord, help me, help me to relax right now. Only you can give me the peace that I need to be able to get through this, In 1996, when I pitched, Game 1 against Atlanta Braves at home, the World Series, I got knocked out in the third inning. I couldn't even tell you, couldn't even remember what had happened. I couldn't even remember the pitches that I had thrown, right? Like, I was just like, how did this happen so fast? And then to go and pitch Game 5 in Atlanta, the last game ever played at Atlanta at Fulton County Stadium, the crowd was just going crazy from the time I walked out of the dugout to go get loose. And it was like, at that moment, man, it just helped me for the rest of my career. I was like, Lord, literally shaking out there in the bullpen trying to get loose for that game. God, I can't do this without you. Like, you have got to calm me and help me to be able to slow things down and focus. And really, truly, that's kind of, just kind of how I learned how to do it, from the failures and the opportunities. And I had so many opportunities early in my career and failed, and so that was, I just always felt like God was just really present with me as I walked through, my journeys and through my struggles and through my successes out there on the baseball field. And he was just a huge part of how I was able to handle things. That's for sure.
And as I listen to you and just the 10 minutes getting ready for this podcast, I got some insight of how you're wired and who you are. You were in the world as much as anyone could be in the world. You're in New York City with the Yankees, with dudes all around you and stuff all around you and pulling at you, and you are in the world as much as any pro athlete could be in the world. But you're not of the world. I want you to speak about how you kept that perspective, how you handled those moments, the bigness of understanding it's not about me. I don't see anything in your life that tells me this is about Andy Pettitte. It's not about you. How did you keep that balance? How did you keep that in perspective?
Yeah,
what a challenge that had to be.
Yeah, I really don't know how to explain it other than, I was saved when I was 11 years old, and I married a preacher's daughter.
Okay.
And so at a young age, I was in the ministry.
Not at 11, though, right? Y'all didn't get married.
No, not at 11. Not at 11.
He asked her at 11. They got married at 12.
Yeah, right. It was close, right?
It was close.
I was 20 and she was 18. So
there you go.
Just for the audience, just making sure that
Yeah. So, I met Laura when I was 15 years old, right? So I got saved at 11. Met my wife now whenever I was 15, and just. So church ministry has always been kind of in the forefront, and I I believe from an early age, I wanted to always take a stand for Christ, and so I felt like God was preparing me for getting to the big leagues and preparing me for what I was going to walk through in New York, and I think that having my family, my wife with me, just really, really helped me with that. But the biggest thing is I knew that, I was a child of God, and we're called to be different. We're called to look different, than the world. And it was a little difficult, I would have to say, I guess, first year in the big leagues and, minor leagues, when Laura wasn't with me, a lot of hotel rooms at night by yourself, and, guys are wanting to run and go do crazy things. And God just kind of always allowed me to say no and to not put myself, I didn't want to put myself in bad spots. So a lot of teammates do that. And I never wanted my wife to lose faith in me or to lose trust in me. I also saw a lot of that as I walked through the minor leagues and early in my big league career when guys would kind of screw up on that end. And so, I wanted my kids, I wanted to leave a legacy for my kids where they saw a man that loved their mom and loved the Lord more than anything, and always wanted to try to honor, Jesus with any accolades that I've got, and just always know that, I wanted to show great humility in the success that I had. And I knew that the talents that I'd had and the ability to do what I did at the major league level wasn't nothing about Andy Pettitte. I do believe I worked extremely hard. God gave me some talent, and God gave me a heart to the makeup to be a grinder, I think, and to mentally be able to get through a lot of stuff whenever I was obviously a lot shorter on talent than a lot of the people that were around me. I didn't throw as hard as most guys. I had to use my mind. I had to be smart out there on the mound. And, obviously, thank the Lord, I had one of the best pickoff moves in the league to be able to get out of, to be able to get some outs here and there during the course of my career. It was always a huge help for me. But, I don't even know. I feel like I kind of rambled along a little bit.
No, not at all.
To answer that question, I just think that it was just a process that God just kind of, just always allowed me to. I was good with being alone. I was good at standing on my own. Mm-hmm. I was good with if nobody else wanted to come to Bible study, or if anybody else didn't want to come to chapel. I'm going to do this. I'm going to follow Jesus, and it prepares you at a young age to whenever I lost both my in-laws on the same day to COVID 2 years ago. And it's just like, why in the world does this happen, And it's like, I'm still going to follow Jesus, right? I mean, God's got a plan behind it. For some reason, he took both of them on the same day. And it's not anything that you ever want to walk through or deal with, but we're going to deal with it. We're going to be faithful. And we're going to talk about how good God is,
I'm glad you kept – I'm going to jump back in there, Chris. I'm glad you kept talking, because that statement you just made, I'm good at being alone, is as impactful as any statement we've had on our podcast. That's going to hit a lot of people right in the nose. As famous as you are, Andy, you're as famous of a baseball player that we have had in the game for a lot of different reasons. I get the feeling you're famous in your home with your wife and your kids from how you've lived your life.
Well, I hope so.
Explain, but I know you are. I know you are. What's more important? The New York Yankees World Series fame, or just for all of us, are you famous in your home? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean,
we know the answer, but I want to hear you talk about it.
I mean, I want to be famous in my home. I want to leave a legacy to my kids. I got 3 boys. I got a daughter, right? I want my wife to know that I love her more than anything else, other than my relationship with Jesus Christ. And it's not easy. I mean, that I'd be lying if I sat here and said this to you. It's not easy. It's not easy for our wives as our sports athletes to walk through the life that they had to walk through, So I think it's very important that we earn their trust and we let them know that, honey, you're more important to me than than this sport, and really and truly the I retired to be home with my family. I retired 2 years earlier in 2011. I retired because really and truly I retired because I felt like God was telling me I needed to retire. You need to go home and make sure that you've raised your boys. And my wife did an unbelievable job with me being gone so long. But I retired because I felt like that I needed to see if my boys have been raised to be the men that I want them to be, And I was able to go home for a year, and I saw my oldest son, Josh, and Jared. They were obviously up in age a little bit, and to be able to see the way that they were handling themselves and the way that they were living their lives. And I was so blessed and so thankful for the way that they've lived their lives. And it allowed me to be able, when the Yankees, called me a year later and said, would you consider coming back? I went back and played for 2 more years, and then ultimately retired. Obviously, I think I was 41 years old. But it was just time. It was time.
Mm-hmm.
Laura was ready for me to be home. It had been such a long, grind, a lot of time away from each other, especially at the kids being at the age that they were. They weren't traveling up to New York as much as they were before. And so, it's so important for me to have a relationship with my kids and that they know that I'm there for them. And I wanted them to, I always want them to see hopefully see a father and a husband and someone that, was leading them in the direction of Jesus, no matter, what's going on in our lives.
Well, as somebody that's had a front row seat to that, I will tell you, Jimmy, his children have a humility and a sweetness and a genuineness that has been caught as much as it's been taught, right? And because their mom and dad model that well, and I certainly can vouch for that. Andy, you said something that Jimmy just said was as impactful as anything that we've had on the podcast, that you were good with being alone. But one thing that I will tell you, Jimmy, and to our listeners is, as somebody that shared a locker room with this man, he's not a loner. Andy and I have played with loners. Like there's dudes that put earbuds in and turn their back to the locker room, and couldn't care less about making a single relationship. That's not Andy. Andy is a fabric of a locker room. Andy is as sought after to hang out with as anybody in a locker room. But he has very clear standards as to what he is going to do and what he isn't going to do. Right? Me, Lance, and Andy were kind of 3 amigos. Like we loved being in the mix. We loved talking trash, talking sports, playing golf, fantasy football drafts. Even though we didn't actually play, we liked to make fun of everybody else's teams. Like we had no problem being in the mix. Andy had no problem being in the mix, but it was very clear where he wasn't going to go and what he wasn't going to do. And so, coach us up, Andy. Coach us up on the men, women too, that are listening to this podcast that love the Lord, but also are in a business and a company and a group setting, maybe coaching a team, maybe part of some sort of group where could be a member of a country club, whatever, where they don't want to be they want to be set apart from decision making, but they want to be in the mix for the purposes of showing love and building community. How do you balance the two?
Yeah, so just on what I said, and Chris, man, what a team we had, right, as far as with the Astros, as far as being alone. I guess what Jimmy, when I said that, there was a lot of years in the minors, where you didn't have a lot of Christian believers, right? A lot of Christian brothers that you were able to run with. And, of course, I was, Chris. I mean, I was in the mix. No matter what teams I was on, I was going to build relationships, and that is how – I felt like that, I was very impactful on teams. And so, but yeah, on your point, Chris, I guess it's back to what we were kind of talking about earlier. It's the confidence of being very secure with who I am in Jesus Christ, right? And being very secure that I'm going to live my life a certain way. I'm not going to be impacted or influenced by how someone else wants to talk to me, or how they want to do things, or what they want to say, or if they want to make comments about me being a Christian, or me inviting people to chapel and stuff like that, or me being a hypocrite or whatever. it's like that some daggers are going to come at you, but you're not afraid of them, right? And so I just had a lot of confidence always, and I wanted to show that, if I went out to meals with guys on the team, hey fellas, can I bless this food for us? It's just an acknowledgement of that, man. I'm a child of Christ, and I've got a lot of confidence in Him and in my relationship with Him. And if it plants a little bit of a seed in somebody, that I'm with that night or whatever, and says, man, there's a little something different about him or whatever, it would always give me an opportunity when you get by yourself with one-on-one with guys, where guys will get interested and want to ask you questions about your faith, and might even start asking you to pray for them with, or talking about things that dudes deal with, right? That we all walk through as men, and it gave me a great opportunity, a great chance to be able to use baseball. I looked at it as my ministry, to be able to share Christ with others. And so, that was kind of how, I kind of walked through it, man. I didn't dodge guys. I didn't want to be around, if I didn't think you were a Christian, I didn't want to not be around you. I felt like I built relationships with every single guys on the team if I could. And I wanted to do that. And that was kind of my goal for sure.
It's exactly what Jesus did. That's exactly how he lived his life. I so appreciate your transparency and your. How do we point people to Jesus if we don't spend time around them? How do they know there's something different about Andy or Chris if we're not around them? Yeah. And I think men are going to, and our listeners overall are going to be very encouraged, Andy, by your stance, your confidence in who you are as a child of God. And we are to be different.
Yeah.
We are to be different. And God's written word right here, it's very clear about how we are to stand out and live our life and point people to just a different way of life. So, man, I really appreciate your transparency. Burke has told me for a couple of months now how great of a dude you are. And it comes through, even in a recorded Zoom call like this. You get a feel for someone's heart. You get a feel for someone's humility. You get a feel for how someone handles a little bit of adversity. And it's obvious that Jesus is complete control of your heart. And I'm not saying you're perfect. None of us are. But, man, what an example and encouragement you have been. Tremendously to us. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Burke,
Pat,
you were
thanks,
right.
brother. Pat, thanks. I appreciate you. One thing I'll say, Jimmy, and this is an encouragement to men everywhere. Very few things are teed up to have the intimacy of a Major League Baseball clubhouse, if you use it for that, right? Because you're just together so much every single day on the road, before the game, after the game. But what I would say is that as Andy and I lived together one spring training, that's where we really got close. And the benefit of a Paul and a Timothy kind of relationship, where you have somebody who's ahead in the faith, somebody who's younger in the faith, and somebody who's ahead in the faith using their position to influence and to speak truth into somebody who desires to grow, is so impactful. And so what I would share with the men while Andy's on here, and maybe, Andy, you can finish with this. Andy tackled tough subjects with me, and I'll give myself a little bit of credit. I wasn't afraid to ask. But I'll never forget a conversation we had about tithing one day that, as a young man making a little bit of money, really impacted me. And this is a little bit unique for this podcast, Andy, but I'm just going to tee you up on this. Men, and Jimmy, I think you would agree with this. You've probably been in tons of men's groups. They talk about lust. They talk about business struggles. They talk about family struggles, pride.
Yep.
Men don't often talk about tithing. This is not a small group conversation that happens a lot. And I'm so grateful that Andy was very – so, Andy, give the men that are listening specifically, women too, just a closing thought on the importance of intimate relationships that allow us to grow, and making sure that we're investing in a few. It's one thing, Ronnie Cordray, Andy, he said you can impress from afar, but you can only influence from up close and personal. I'm so grateful that I was influenced by Andy And Andy, I just kind of give you the floor to speak into that.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, I believe that God, right, puts people in our lives, puts us in situations to try to make an impact, right, to try to influence people towards the kingdom. And what an unbelievable, what you talk about that spring training and how fun. I mean, for me to be able to be have you in the house and ask questions and you be able to see, me live my life with my family, and just, you saw that firsthand, right? And so I just believe that we always should be looking. We should have our eyes up and looking around for the people that God has put in our paths to try to influence and to lead and maybe to help grow, help them grow in their relationship with Jesus. And it's been inspiring for me, Chris, just to brag on you a little bit, to be able to see from what a young man you were, not married, to be able to see you and watch you walk through your life and the way you've grown in your faith. And I mean, man, God's just done great things with you. And so, when I think back on that, our relationship and just how that's come out, it's just God gives us those relationships, man. And me and you'll have a bond until the day we die, from the way we've grown, and obviously because we're Christian brothers and we are brothers in Christ and we're family, man. And so, I mean, that's literally, the way I look at it. So I would just encourage people to always have your eyes open for an opportunity to share Jesus and to impact someone, whether they're younger than you, whether they're older than you. But we've got one time in this life. I use the quote from Herm Edwards. It said, "Your life is not a dress rehearsal." We got one time at this deal, and we need to be very mindful of that and thoughtful of that and calculated on how we want to leverage our faith the best way that we can to impact others around us. But you're right. I mean, there's nothing better than the intimacy of a clubhouse and having guys around you. And if people are, most people probably watching this are sports people and stuff like that, then, you'll be spending so much time with your teammates and get your eyes off yourself, right? I mean, in today's society, almost everyone, right? It's like, what can you do for me? We're called to keep our eyes off ourselves, look to serve others, look to impact others, and love on others. And man, that's the way God wants us to do it. And I feel like you're going to live a great life if you're doing that, and a peaceful life, and one that's going to be very gratifying. That's for sure.
Well said. Thank you, brother.
Yeah.
Appreciate your
Andy,
time.
Thanks for coaching us up, man.
You
Very
bet.
well done.
You bet. Enjoyed being with you guys today.